Shelby here. Welcome back to A Little Literary Love. Glad y'all are with me. Today we're doing my end of the month wrap up for March. So we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in the latter half of the month. And I did really good. My reading speed and the amount that I read picked up, and I read a lot of really good books this month too. I was just in a really good reading place. I think a lot of it has to do with me being on maternity leave, so I'm literally just home all the time. I don't have anywhere to go. I'm just home with my kids, and I've been having a lot of time to read, so it's been really good. So for the latter half of March, I read 15 books, which is really good. And I also read a total of 22 books for the whole month of March. If you haven't seen my earlier video that I did of my mid-month wrap-up where I talked about the books that I read in the first half of March, make sure you check that one out. And then I'll also be talking about some of the books that I read for the video I did where I read the book refuges, like favorite books. So I'll be talking about some of those books in here too. So let's get right into all of these books because, like I said, it was a really good reading month. Most of the books that I rated were 4-star or higher, so I was enjoying like everything that I was reading. So the first book that I read for the latter half of March is going to be Hearts Recaptured by Tillie. This is the second book in the Hades Hangman series. So that's this is a series that I've been wanting to try to finish this year. This one, the second one, and then later on I'll talk about the third one. I've read those books before. I read them a couple of years ago, and I just, for whatever reason, never finished the series, but that's one of my goals for this year to do. So this series is about a MC, a motorcycle club, and it also involves a cult. In the first book that I talked about in the mid-month wrap-up, we have this woman who escapes from the cult and she runs into this MC. So now the members of the MC know about this cult, and they rescued some other women from this cult. So this book follows the vice president of the MC. His name is Cate, and he's seen as like a womanizer. He's always sleeping around with, they call them the club sluts, just basically women that like to hang around the club. He never wants to like settle down. He loves his life, but he is blown away by one of the women that they rescued, by her beauty. He thinks that she is hands down the most beautiful woman he has ever seen in his entire life. And of course, he would love to have the chance to sleep with her, but that's not going to happen because she is the sister of our heroine from the first book. So he knows that if he sleeps with her or hurts her in any way, that his president and best friend is going to kick his butt, and he will probably kill him. But said heroine, her name is Lila, she is having a really hard time adjusting to life outside of the cult and the compound that she grew up in. She still firmly believes what they told her, and she has faith in this like false religion that they created, and she believes that she is sinful, that she has evil inside of her because she is so beautiful, and that her beauty will make other people fall from grace, like go to hell basically. And she has a really hard time adjusting to the sinful ways of the MC. So Styx, who's the president, he's the hero from the first book, he tells Kai to be like, hey, just watch out for her, introduce her to our way of life, get her used to living on the outside world, and show her that it's not this terrible place. So they get together and they start talking, and their romance kind of blooms from all of this. So I gave this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed seeing this like womanizer type hero start to fall for one woman, and it was just their love story was just so beautiful, and I just loved it. So definitely this is leaning more towards dark romance. There are a lot of triggers, and there's a lot of triggers for like all of the books in this series, especially because these women in the cult, their virginity is forcibly taken from them when they are children. So it doesn't delve into a ton of scenes with that, but just know that it happens to this character, and she has a lot of trauma from that. There's also another, like, there's a sexual assault scene in this book. There's abuse. There's a lot of torture as well. So, and then the steam for these books, I would say for the most part for the whole series, they're gonna be around like medium to high steam. Okay. Then the next one that I read is going to be The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie by Jennifer Ashley. This is a historical romance. I read this one for that video that I did that I will link. So this is about our hero. His name is Ian, and it's never actually said in this book, but just the way that he acts and what I've heard from other people that have read this book, that he would definitely fall somewhere on the autism spectrum. He has like a hard time meeting people's eye. He takes things literally. Just a lot of other kind of quirks that he has. And he wants our heroine, Beth. But Beth is supposed to be getting married to this other guy. She is a widow, so she is getting remarried. But Ian does not like that guy. And he tells her that that other guy is into some like sexual things that is kind of frowned upon at this time, and he basically like breaks up they're getting married, like he stops that from happening. And then he tells Beth that he wants to marry her instead because he thinks she's beautiful and thinks that she's worth a lot, worth much more than what that other guy would give her. But she's kind of decides that she doesn't want to get remarried for love, and she has a feeling that she would fall in love with Ian if she did get married to him or spend a lot more time with him. So she turns him down, but Ian just keeps pursuing her, and they start to become lovers, and then eventually he kind of wears her down and they get married, and it's kind of their romance. I give this 4 stars. I really, really enjoyed this one, and I'm really sad that it took me so long to read this book because it was so enjoyable. There is also another like a side plot happening with this like mystery of this murder that takes place, and Beth is trying to figure out what actually happened because Ian has something, like he knows some things about what happened, but he doesn't want her to get involved because he thinks that she might be in danger if she does get involved. So there's a little bit subplot with that going on, which I also really enjoyed. I was intrigued by. This does have some trigger warnings for some past trauma and abuse with Ian, our heroine, or our hero from this story, because for several years of his life, he was actually locked up in an asylum because his father thought something was wrong with him and decided to lock him up just because that's what people did at that time. So he does have a little bit of trauma from that. But then the steam on this one was very high, which I was pleasantly surprised by because I find a lot of historical romances, the steam isn't quite so high. It's more around like a medium on the steam, but like I said, this was really high and I really enjoyed it. Then we have Run Posy Run by Kate C. Wells. I read this also for that video that I read, or that video that I did reading the Book Refuge's favorite books. This is a mafia-esque romance, and this is kind of a second chance romance. So this is about Posy, and at the very beginning of this book, her boyfriend, who is a big hacho kind of guy in the mafia, he is breaking up with her because he found a video, a sex tape video that one of her ex-boyfriends had made, and they had doctored it up to make it look like it had happened while she was dating him. So he thinks that she cheated on him, and he is kicking her out of his house, and he breaks up with her. However, he was also kind of her protection for the mafia because her family was in the mafia, but her dad did something like, I don't remember if he like laundered money or something that got him kicked out. And so the rest of the people think that she is a liability and they want to kill her. So the only reason that she was okay was because she was dating him and he was able to keep her safe. So now she is on the run for her life to try to stay alive. And after she leaves, the hero of the story, which I didn't write down his name, I don't remember what his name is. After she leaves, he kind of realizes that he liked having her around, and he does a little bit of digging and finds out that that video was doctored and that she wasn't lying to him. And so he sets out to try to get her back and try to find her and to protect her also, because he doesn't want anybody to kill her, because he's like, oh, I actually really like her and I want her to stick around. So this story, our hero, we have a psychopathic character. He does not have feelings. And our heroine, while she's on the run, kind of realizes that. And she also kind of realizes that all of this relationship with him and all of her past relationships, she was kind of just walked on. She had pretty low self-esteem and self-worth. So she kind of just let these guys do whatever they wanted to her just so that they would keep her around so that she wouldn't be lonely. And so this whole story is them, like, her side, she's kind of discovering herself and realizing that she's not going to put up with what she used to put up with. But then our hero is also starting to somewhat have emotional feelings and attachment towards our heroine. So it's very interesting to see that those two kind of sides coming together in this story. And I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. I'm really interested to read some more Kate C. Wells books, because this one was like, it was super easy to read too. I like flew through it. Let's see here. There are trigger warnings for like torture, murder, and this was also pretty high steam. So there's that one. Then I read Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark. This is the first book in the Brutal Birthright series. This is another book that I read for that video that I did reading the Book Refuge's favorite books. And I think that's the last one that I'm going to talk about. That was for that video. So I'm so sad that it took me so long to read a Sophie Lark book. I've actually read one book before, but I never read anything else, and I don't remember a ton of what that book was about. It's in her Russian mafia series. But this one, so this starts out, we have two families in Chicago, and they don't really get along. They're both kind of in the mafia. We have Ada, and her family is part of the Italian mafia. And then we have Callum, whose family is part of the Irish mafia. Callum's little sister is having a birthday at their house, and Ada and her brothers decide that they're going to crash the party. So while they're at Callum's family home, Ada decides that she wants to kind of snoop around their house because they kind of have a part of their grudge against Callum's family, not the whole grudge against them, but part of the thing that they don't like about them is that they kind of feel like Callum's family is very snooty and they very much like flaunt their wealth. They live in this big fancy mansion. Callum's sister, they actually like hired like a pop star to like sing at her birthday, and they had fireworks, and so she just wants to like snoop around to kind of see what all kind of like fancy schmancy stuff that they have in their home. And she's in their library, and then Callum actually walks in, and so she has to hide because she doesn't want them to know that, one, that they're there and crash the party, but two, that she doesn't want to get caught snooping. But he stays there in the room longer than what she anticipated. And so she's trying to figure out a way to get out of this room and leave. So she decides that she's going to start a small fire, no big deal, and catch like the drapes on fire, and like it'd be fine. She's like, oh, it'll just be a small fire. It'll mostly just cause some smoke, and he'll have to get up and investigate. And while he's doing that, I can just get out of this room really quickly. Well, that's not what happens. The entire drapery bursts up into flames and the fire starts spreading, and so it's a big disaster, and she's freaking out, and she like jumps up and leaves, but he sees her when she leaves, so he's like, dang it, these Italian people, like, so he goes after them, and they get into this huge conflict. And so their parents are like, whoa, okay, we have to stop this because we can't let this escalate even more. And they decide that those two are going to get married to try to bring peace and alliance between the two of them. Because then we also have this other, the Polish mafia that is also in Chicago, that they need to form an alliance against, so that Polish mafia doesn't become too powerful. So that's the big setup for this story. It's definitely an enemies to lovers. We have the arranged marriage trope. I loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars because I'm going to wait and see how I feel about this book in maybe like a month or two, and see if I'm still like super in love with it, and see if I'm still thinking about it, and I might bump it up to a 5-star, because I think this is probably like one of the best setups for a book ever. And it's a really good setup for the series too, because the rest of the books in this series follow Callum's and Ada's siblings and sees them all get their romances. So I just absolutely, like I said, I love this. Sophie Lark's writing is also, it's very funny and it's very easy to read. I blew through this book. She also, I never knew this, but if you read her books like on Kindle, which I'm pretty sure all of her books are on Kindle Unlimited. I could be wrong. I think most, if not all of her books are on Kindle Unlimited, which is where I got this book from. So I read it, on my e-reader or on my phone. So she has a playlist for all of her books, and you can actually find her playlists on like Apple, or I think on Spotify, and then where she like talks about, like, she has references in the book to like songs that would like match up with this scene, and then she has like a link like in the passage while you're reading the book, so you can quickly go to it and start playing it while you're reading, which I think is like super cool. So yeah. Let's see here. Oh, there's trigger warnings for torture and murder. This is more on the dark romance kind of side because it is mafia. And then the steam on this was definitely very high. And like I said, I very much enjoyed this. I loved it. Then I read The Lord I Left, which is the third, and I think this is the last book. I haven't really heard anything about any more books in this series, but the third book in the Secrets of Charlotte Street series, and this is by Scarlett Peckham. I read the first 2 books in this series in February. This is a historical romance. This is about Alice, and she works at they call it a whipping house, but it's kind of like a place where people can engage in like BDSM and other like sexual type activities that not, I would say, I guess not the vast majority engage in. So anyway, so Alice works at this place. And then we also have our hero, who is I believe he's a minister. Yes, I'm pretty sure he's a minister. And he has been kind of just getting information about this place. He wants to kind of learn a little bit more about it, maybe kind of spread the word of the gospel, and then also try to find, help anybody that's there if he can. And so Alice gets a letter from her family that her mother is very sick and could potentially pass away. And so she needs to go back home to visit with her mother one last time. And so our hero, Henry is his name, he is planning on kind of going back to his home as well for a little bit, and he offers her a ride. And so they are going together, traveling together to go back to both of their respective homes. Alice doesn't really care for Henry that much because of just kind of with his religious beliefs, doesn't think that he likes her very much and what she does at this place. So on their journey, they kind of start up a friendship and they get to talking more about each other and kind of what their beliefs are and what they think. And of course, then it ends up becoming their romance. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I didn't enjoy this one as much as the others in this series. It probably didn't help that I was listening to this on audio and I didn't listen to it all like in 1 or 2 sittings. It took me a while to get through this. But it was really cute. This was the least steamy of all 3 of the books in this series. And I wish it had been a little bit steamier. And I wish since he's a minister and he's kind of like that, the angst, I guess, of him, his beliefs and how him wanting Alice, if that goes against his beliefs and like his struggle with that. I just didn't see that as much in this one. I guess I was just wanting a little bit more of that. I was wanting a little bit more of that angst that would come with that. So that's kind of why I have it more around the 3.5 star range. And like I said, this was the least steamy. I would put it around medium because there was a little bit of steam in it, but I just wish there was a little bit more. Then we have Souls Unfractured, which is the 3rd book in the Hades Hangman series by Tillie Cole. So like I said, this is another reread for me. This is about Flame, who is a member of the MC, the Hades Hangman MC. And here we have another character that I think would definitely fall on the autism spectrum. Again, it's not actually exclusively mentioned in this book, but just the way the character acts, I think he would definitely fall on that range somewhere. And then we also have our heroine, Maddie. She's also a sister of the heroine from the 1st book. And this is their love story. So Flame is called the psycho of the group. He's very scary. He has flame tattoos all over his body. He notoriously, from the other books you can see, he cuts himself a lot. And he's very obsessed with killing people and torturing people. But once Maddie and her other sister come to where they live, he is very infatuated with Maddie and obsessed with her, because when they were rescuing them, Maddie actually hugged him, and he also is notorious. He does not want anybody to touch him. He cannot handle people touching him, but he was actually okay with Maddie touching him. So because of that, he's very fascinated by her and he wants to protect her. So he's always outside her window, making sure like he never goes back home. Well, he does, but like only for brief periods. He wants to stay basically by Maddie's side 24/7 so that he can watch over her and protect her because he doesn't want anything to happen to her. Very, very sweet. And then from this book, we get a little bit more backstory about why, one, he doesn't want anybody to touch him, and two, why he's constantly cutting himself. And there's a lot of trauma for him in his past. He was abused. Just like I said, a lot of trauma. So then we also have Maddie, who also has had a lot of trauma in her life because like I said before, all of these women, their virginity gets taken from them when they are children. And Maddie's got taken when she was much younger than what they usually do for these women. And the person that did this to her, he was a lot rougher and into a lot more like darker and rougher sexual kinks than most other men at this compound cult. So she is afraid of men, doesn't really want anybody to touch her, but she feels safe with Flame, and he ends up kind of going off of the deep end. They end up going on a run, and there is a shooting that is very triggering for him and sets off an episode. And all of his friends think that they're not going to be able to get him out of this. They don't really know what to do for him. But Maddie decides that she's going to try to help him to try to like take him off of this ledge and help him work through some of his problems and issues that he has forming from that past trauma that he has. And they kind of work together on that. I absolutely love this book. I gave this is a 5-star read for me. I think that both of these characters are just such sweet, innocent little beings. I love them so much. I want to just like hold them in my arms and they're so darn cute together. I absolutely love this. These are probably my favorite couple from the series so far because I'm still working my way through it, but I just love it so much. There's a lot of trigger warnings for this. Very graphic torture scenes. Like I said, there is child abuse, trauma, and I would say, again, the esteem for this is going to be medium to high. Like I said, I love this one. Then the next one that I read is House of Sky and Breath by Sara J. Maas. I finally got around to finishing this one. I started this in February when it first came out, but I only got maybe like 200 pages in, and this is a huge chunk of a book. It is 800 pages, but I finally finished it. So this kind of continues on from where the first book in the series kind of left off. We have Hunt and Bryce, who are our two main characters, and they're just kind of living life. I'm trying to decide what to say. I don't want to say too much about this because I don't want to like spoil too much about it, and I also don't want to end up spoiling anything from the first book. I really think once you read the first book, I really think it's really best just to go in blind to this. That's kind of what I did. I didn't read this little synopsis thing about what it was about. I kind of isolated myself. I didn't look at social media to kind of see what anybody else reviewed this for. I just went into it. One thing I will say about this, so what is going on in this, there is the two characters end up getting a little bit involved with these rebels. that were kind of mentioned a little bit in the first one, but they didn't play like a significant part of it. They're much more prevalent in this book. And so they kind of get involved with a plot with them. That's all I'm going to say. The steam on this was definitely higher than the first book. I would say if you have read Court of Silver Flames, which I read at the beginning of this year, it is not as steamy as that book, but it is steamier than the first book. So if you read the first book and were wanting some kind of steam, you'll get it in this book for sure. So I gave this 4.5 stars. There were some things in here that I didn't really care for. It kind of felt like some of the plot just got solved much more easily than I think it should have been. And then there were some things that these characters just like plopped up that, oh yeah, we totally knew about that thing that's happening. Like, it just kind of felt like that was kind of random and just kind of like helped to move the plot along a little bit more. It was just, like I said, some of those things, it was just solved a little bit too easily for me, which I didn't really care for. But, oh boy, does this end kind of on a cliffhanger. But the ending, like, it kind of like blew my mind how this ended. And I kind of had to just like sit there and like think about it. Like, I'm still thinking about it. And I am dying for the next book in this series to come out to find out what is going on. So there is that. Okay, we're moving on. Next book that I read is going to be Praised by Sara Cate. This is actually a new release for this month. Which I'm kind of surprised that I actually got to. I rarely read new releases. I usually end up reading them like way later on because there's so many books that I want to read that I feel like the books that have already been released, I need to take priority for those. I don't know. That's kind of just how my brain works sometimes. This is going to be a part of a series. So this is going to be a part of the Salacious Players Club series that Sara Cate is writing. And the next book in the series actually, I believe, comes out at the end of April, which I'm really looking forward to. So this is about our heroine. Her name is, I think, Charlie. And she has broken up with her boyfriend. And they were going to get a lease on like an apartment. And she is wanting the money back on the down payment. But it gets sent to his dad instead. So she has to go and visit her ex-boyfriend's dad to try to get this money back. And he owns what's called the Salacious Players Club. This club that he owns with a few of his friends. And it's basically like a sex club of sorts. And it's also, I think it's also like an app or something. And he is a dominant, and he has these like people that he kind of hires to be a service submissive for him. He doesn't always have sex with them, but he does sometimes. And he just keeps going through all these women because he can't find a right fit. So when she shows up at his house, which is where he works from home, he thinks that she is there to be his new submissive. And there's like a lot of miscommunication. And then once they figure out what's going on, he apologizes to her and gives her money back. But then later on, he offers her a job to actually be his secretary. He's like, no like sexual things involved whatsoever. But she kind of got an inkling for like maybe what being a submissive might be like. And so she kind of asks him to like teach her and get her a little bit more involved in that. And they end up forming a romance. And this was so good. I loved it. It was very taboo because we have that. I heard somebody say that this is called the "your dad can do it better" trope, which I'm all for. I love this trope. I love reading it in books. There's also an age gap because he is in his 40s, I believe, and she's like early 20s. This also is a really great beginner book, I would say, for like BDSM, because he is having to like teach her what goes into it, you know, about like how she can stop at any time, you know, just different things that's always about consent, that's as long as she's consenting. Oh, and then since he hired her to be his secretary, not his like sexual secretary, but an actual secretary, I would consider this kind of like a workplace romance as well, even though it's just the two of them. Since he works from his home, like there's literally no other people around. He doesn't really have a boss that he has to go to, but I would still consider it like workplace. And then they, you know, they have to deal with, her ex-boyfriend is definitely a detriment to, or a deterrent, I guess, for them getting together, because his son doesn't really like him and doesn't approve of his business and what he likes, like his sexual likes. And just basically doesn't like him. So he knows that his son would not approve them being together. So they have to work through a lot of that too. There are some trigger warnings for, I would say it's pretty mild, like transphobia. There is a trans character in this story that then their father has some issues with. I'm probably saying this incorrectly, but it's mostly off screen or off page. So that's why I would say it's pretty mild, but it is there. So I just want to put that out there. This is also high steam. Then we have Deep Redemption, which is the fourth book of the Hades Hangman series by Tillie. So here we have a book in this series that I had not previously read. This is all brand new to me this month. And this is, as the title suggests, with it saying, you know, redemption, this is definitely a redemption story for a character that has previously in the other books kind of been a little bit of the villain, so to speak, of this story. His name is Cain. And if you are familiar with the Bible, of the Cain and Abel story, you'll kind of know a little bit of how this is going to play out. He has a twin brother, and Cain is supposed to, he descends and becomes the prophet of the cult, and he is supposed to kind of give out doctrines and all these revelations that he has with talking with God and what they're supposed to be doing. And he's not really getting any of those. And he starts to kind of think that some of the things that they're doing at this cult, this compound, are not really that great and are not actually good things to be doing. And he is questioning a lot of things. He's questioning his faith. And his twin brother does not like this and decides to put him in a cell and imprison him, because he definitely, since he is questioning their faith, he must be, you know, in line with the devil, and he needs to atone. So he locks him in a cell and begins torturing his brother. So that, you know, definitely doesn't really help Cain towards their cause. And he has a lot of things to work through with his brother and for himself too, and his beliefs and what he previously thought that he knew to be the truth. And now, like I said, he's questioning. But meanwhile, while he's kind of locked up in this cell, they bring in this other woman from an outside compound. So they have the main compound and they have all these kind of outliers that they're all bringing together to form this huge main compound for their people. And one of the women that they bring in, they decide she is another cursed. So from the women from the other 3 books, they are known as the cursed. They were chosen specifically because they are so beautiful that they would cause men to sin and be sinful and fall from their faith. And so they were kind of pushed together and locked up and kept away from the public so that they wouldn't cause other people to sin and like go to hell. So, but they need somebody because it was prophesied by the prior prophet that one of the curseds has to marry the prophet in order for all of the people to be saved. No idea how that's supposed to happen or the logic in that, but that's what they said. So they needed another cursed person for the prophet to marry so that they all could be saved. And lo and behold, they find another one. So they also lock her up in these cells because they need to keep her away from all the other people until the prophet can marry her. So they are in cells next to each other and they start up conversations with each other, and he gets to find out a little bit more what life is like for women in this place, what has actually happened to all these women, how they get their virginity taken from them at a very, very young age, how they are abused. And you know, he feels so much grief and he feels so sorry that he didn't stop all these things from happening. So he decides that he's going to try to do something to get this woman out and to stop everything else from happening that has been happening at this place. And in the meantime, those 2 characters end up falling in love with each other. I gave this 5 stars. This was so good. And I think why I didn't continue this previously was because when I found out about what this book, the characters that this book was going to be about, I was kind of like, meh, I don't really care about those characters. I just don't really feel like reading it, kind of thing. But since I'm wanting to finish it, I pushed my way through it, and I'm so glad I did because this is probably one of my favorites. This wasn't my favorite couple like Flame and Maddie from the previous book of the series, but I just felt so much for these characters, especially Cain. Like I said, the huge struggle that he was going through and trying to redeem himself for some of the things that he did in the past. And it was just absolutely beautiful, his story. And I wish I'm still it didn't totally end with everybody being okay with him again and being okay with like forgiving him. Not everybody has done that, but I am very much hoping that in the next few books of this series, or at least by the very end of the series, that he kind of gets welcomed back. I'm hoping that because he deserves it so much for all the crap that he went through. It was so good. This has huge trigger warnings in it. Definitely past abuse, there's trauma, there's torture in this. There is also a mass murder scene that was hard to read. So just know that going into it. And again, this is medium to high steam. Then we have Stolen Heir by Sophie Lark. This is the second book in the Brutal Birthright series. So this one is about Nessa, who was the girl that was having her birthday party in the first one. This is her story. She is the youngest in Callum's family. And then we also have our hero, Miko, yes. He is part of the Polish mafia. So remember, like I said, the Irish and the Italians, they got together to form an alliance against the Polish. Well, Migo does not like this, and they had ended up at the end of the first one, they actually killed his father, and he is very upset about this, and he wants revenge against both the Irish and the Italians. And so he decides he's going to kidnap Nessa because she is very protected in the family. They don't involve her at all in any of what they do. She's very innocent too, and he knows that if he takes her, that will just cripple both of their families, because she's also the youngest too. Yes, so he kidnaps her and brings her to his house, and then he decides while he has her, he's just going to do all these different things to kind of mess with them. So, but it ends up becoming their romance. So we definitely have the captor-captive trope. This also is more like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. There are lots of allusions to Beauty and the Beast in this story, and I really liked that. I like how Sophie Lark did it. I feel like Beauty and the Beast is just very much overdone in the romance like realm. There's lots and lots and lots of romance retellings of Beauty and the Beast, but I think Sophie Lark did it really well with this one. I gave this one 4 stars. I didn't like this one as much as the first one, but it was still very enjoyable. And then I would also say the steam on this was a little bit lower than the first one. I would put it around medium to high, but it is still there, but it's just not as much as the first one. Then I read Heat Haven. This is by Sara Blue and Ashley Bennett. I would consider this more on like of a novella. It was like around 150 pages, somewhere around there. And this is a like Omegaverse kind of book. We have our heroine who is an Omega, and she is going to this like Omega sanctuary where Omegas can go to during their heats. That's kind of the title of the story. The Heat Haven is a haven for Omegas for during their heat cycle, so that they don't get abused by an alpha. They get matched up to these willing alphas, and then they have like a beta kind of mediary kind of person during the whole process of the heat to make sure that everything is consensual during the heat and that the Omega doesn't get like abused. So that's where this takes place, that our heroine is Omega and she is there for that, and she is at this place to kind of choose who her alphas to participate in her heat and to kind of choose like the room that she wants to have it in, all that. And then we also have our hero of the story who is an alpha, and he decides to sign up and go to this just to kind of help him maybe potentially meet an Omega to help form his own pack. And these two characters, they end up getting stuck in an elevator together, and he has to, like, she's panicking because they're stuck in there, and he has to kind of like calm her down, and they start to like form a relationship and form a connection to each other. And he ends up, since she feels safe with him and really enjoys being around him, she ends up adding him to her list of alphas that she wants with her during her heat. And then they end up going into like her heat cycle, and they kind of form that romance. This was really cute and really quick, and also very steamy too, which I very much enjoyed. I gave this 4 stars. And this was a high steam book. So, and I believe this is going to be a series. I could be wrong on that. So I'm interested to see what they have in store for the next book. Then I read Initiation, which is the first book of the Sex Wizards series. This is the only one that's out so far, but I know that the author has plans for more books of this series. This is by Alethea, and I could be saying that wrong, Faust. this is a fantasy. I would not consider this a romance, even though I think this is probably like erotic fantasy, if that's a thing. This is about our hero who gets this letter and gets invited to go to the Crux, which is kind of like a magic school in this world. Gets invited to go there to try to just learn about his magical abilities that he didn't know that he had, and learn how to like cast spells and more about like magic in general. The thing about this world is, so magic is created through various kinks and kink-based activities. So through sex, basically. And depending on what type of sexual activity that you have is the type of kind of spell that is created. So he is there learning about all these different kinds, which is where the erotic part of this story comes in, because there's basically sex in like every single chapter, and lots of different types of kinks. So like there's BDSM, there is impact play, which so that like spanking, anywhere from spanking to like caning to whipping. There is sensory deprivation, there's degradation, there's all kinds of different kinks. There is also a gangbang in this book. There's also, while he's there kind of learning about all the magic and what kind of magic that he can do and like casting like spells kind of thing, there's also a kind of a subplot going on that there are a lot of wizards have gone missing, and so he decides that he wants to try to help to figure out where those wizards have gone and maybe help get them back. So that is what this one is about. Definitely very high steam for this, and like I said, I wouldn't consider this a romance. There is one character that our hero starts to become a little bit more attached to than some of the other characters that he ends up having sex with, so I could see like a romance kind of more forming, especially more in the second book of this series, but again, I wouldn't call this a romance. There is also a lot, like very good LGBTQ plus rep, I feel like, in this book. The author is in that group. I believe from what the like blurbs that I read about the author, they go by they pronouns, so I'm assuming they identify as like non-binary. There are non-binary characters in this. There is an intersex character in this. I think the author meant for our hero to be more like pansexual. But yeah, so all kinds of different types of representation for this book. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I definitely feel like this is a very sex positive book, which I also really enjoyed. I liked reading that. It's very, even though I read a lot of books with sex in them, I don't really consider them to be sex positive. So it's just really nice to read that in this book. Then the last 3 books that I read are going to be in the Bloodline vampire series. So we have the first one, which is Sacrifice. This is a reread for me. I read the first 2 books prior to this, but I hadn't read the third one, so I decided to just go ahead and pick these up real quick because these are also like more novella type books. This is by Cate Robert. These are vampire books. We have our heroine, who is a Dampier, so she is half vampire, half human, and her father is not a very good guy, and he hands her over to our main hero of this book, and he has been locked up in his house for years by the heroine's father, and so he gives her to him basically to be a like blood bag, and then also because her father wants wants her to get pregnant with this guy's baby so that he can control that baby and the bloodline. Because so the vampires, there's all these, like, there's you can be made into a vampire, but then there's these 7 main bloodline where all vampires kind of originated from. And so her father's one of those, and then this other guy that's kind of locked up is another one, but he is the very, very last of his bloodline, and her father wants control of that bloodline, so that's why he wants her to get married or to get pregnant with his baby. But he also has 2 male friends that he also likes to have sex with, so they end up getting involved, and this ends up becoming there's 4, so is that like a quartet relationship? I don't know. On par for Katie Robert. This is very high on the steam scale. Then we go into the next book, which is Heir. And so our heroine has kind of come into her powers that she didn't think were existent in the first book. And the 4 of them are again having lots and lots of kinky sex, and they are basically trying to figure out how they can overthrow her father. Again, high steam. And then the 3rd book of this series, Queen, which I had not read previously, is basically the conclusion of this story. Our heroine is now pregnant in this book, and she is just trying to figure out a way again to overthrow her father and to live a happy life with her 3 men that she's in love with. So I don't remember if I said for all of these, I gave all of these 4 stars. I'm a sucker for Katie Roberts' writing. They're very, very high steam, which I thoroughly enjoy. And these are really quick to get through. It's an easy read. I enjoyed the plots for them. Nothing too overly complicated. Yeah, I just really enjoyed them. So that is going to be it for my wrap up and all the books that I read. Make sure you comment down below what were some of your favorite books that you read for the month of March. What are some books that I need to check out and try to read? And if you like this video, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my channel so that you can check out and watch more videos from me when I post them. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye, guys.